I do want to thank Mark for asking me to give this talk. I remember when Yogi Berra got inducted into the Hall of Fame, he said he wanted to thank everybody for making this day necessary. So Mark, thanks for making this day necessary for me. It kind of gave me an opportunity to try to collect my thoughts and to think about what I wanted to say. And, you know, I don't know about you, but have other people been thinking that things are pretty weird these days? I know that one of the things that's become very clear for me is that I have finally learned how to spell unprecedented. And in fact, I have used that word in an unprecedented amount of times. Now, this talk about calling all bodhisattvas, I'm actually giving this talk for the Community Mental Health Center for the community. And what the title is, When I Am So Right and You Are So Wrong, the Art of Disagreeing, which I think is a pretty timely topic right now. And all my talks, you know, when we think about what's going on now, one of the things is that all my talks really are a call for action. You know, I have this notion that insight is overrated, that ideas without action doesn't lead to change. And so all my talks are really about inviting change. And this change is basically based on what I think the world should be. And so what has become very clear to me is that we do not know how to disagree. That I am right and you are wrong just only continues to encourage struggle. We are certainly living at a time with accelerated struggle and opposition. There's been and the other piece is that there's a disintegration of principles and values. Honesty, integrity, kindness, respect. It's as if there's been a release of repressed indecency in this world. There are no conversations, no one is listening, no one is heard, and consensus is absolutely impossible. We are engaged in a national shouting match. We are entrenched in positions that will never align. It will always be that I am right and you are wrong. And polarization is rooted in the inflexible adherence to an ideology. You know, we live in this culture that it's a sports mentality. We have this undying, unquestioning allegiance to our team. It's a win-lose that is really deteriorating our society and our culture. And yet, we are living at a time in which we have never been more connected. I mean, think about this. This blows my mind. Think about this. For the rest of our lives, for the rest of your life, no matter what age you are, you can travel anywhere in the world and have something in common with every other person on this earth. I find that incredible to really to think about. And yet, we are so disconnected. And so I decided as a family therapist, I decided to think of humankind as a client of mine. I mean, it's hard to get in, therapists, very hard to get in, but I kind of thought of humankind as being in crisis. I see such clear similarities to the struggles that take place in families and with the struggles that are taking place in our larger society. And so in my work as a family therapist, I don't focus on the content of the issues, the stories. I don't get into hearing that you would wish your partner would contribute more, or you wish your partner wouldn't spend more money. Getting into those negotiations when I was younger, what I was really doing was helping people solve one problem. I wasn't teaching them how to address any of the issues in their lives. And so I then began to recognize that it's important to understand the habitual interactional patterns that actually foster struggle or foster harmony. You know, in my work of 40 years of working with families, I have certainly learned how people struggle, and I've also learned how they thrive. These habitual patterns will always continue to provide the same outcomes. They will not change. I always say that people keep using the same strategies over and over again, more frequently, but only louder. And there is no change. It is not the issues that perpetuates the problems. It's how people talk about the issues, how people engage about the issues that maintains the problem. It's the realization that the issues cannot be more important than the relationship. And in our culture, one of the structures that is so clear, as it is in any families that struggle, is that we have taken the positions of being stuck opposers, competing realities. Stuck opposers rigidly adhere to their view. They feel very justified, they are righteous, and they are very judgmental. That's because I am right and you are wrong. These battles of ideologies, these beliefs, these perspectives, these realities will never align. It will never align. It will always be a win-lose battle. And for families, it's a lose-lose. And certainly in our culture and in our society, it is also a lose-lose for all of us. And when you get into these stuck opposing positions, the issues really become secondary. It's the power struggle to be right, to defend yourself becomes what's really primary. The relationship is always sacrificed, and peace and harmony is always sacrificed. So in stuck opposition and competing realities, there is never negotiation, there is never compromise, there is never agreement. Being stuck opposers structures the relationship to be adversaries and enemies. The outcomes of conversations are not what is most important. The way that we engage is what is preventing us from moving forward as a society and as a culture. Same as in families. We've developed these rituals of struggle that prevent any new ideas from emerging from our differences. Instead of connecting to create a more mutually beneficial existence for all, we are engaged in a self-destructive process for humankind and our very existence on this earth. And so for me, it's very clear that the time to awaken to what we are creating is now. And what I see as a core problem, and you see it certainly during this election time, is that we have stopped seeing each other as human beings. We demonize and dehumanize the other. And in its most horrific forms, the dehumanizing of people is slavery, is Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. It's Rwanda, it's all the atrocities that we as humankind have always experienced. It's warfare psychology. Think about this. In warfare psychology, you have to take the humanness out of the enemy. There isn't a soldier that could point a gun and take the life of another person when they're thinking about the family that loved them at home, the people whose hearts are going to be broken, and the sorrow that is going to occur with the death of the person that you are about, the life that you're about to take. And the trajectory of the rest of those families for the rest of their lives is going to be affected by that if you think of this person as a human being. It'd be an interesting way of really recognizing how we can eliminate war if everyone just remembered how human we are. And when I start to think about the human struggles, I'm always looking at the primal needs, primal instincts that are woven into our DNA. In all chronically conflictual relationships, there is one single primary need, one single ingredient that is always missing, always missing. And in all mutually beneficial relationships, this single primal need is always present, always. And that is respect. I think we should have Aretha singing it out for us right now. But I am not talking about respect as a social etiquette, being polite. I am talking about respect as a primal need. When the first humans began wandering this earth, respect meant acceptance. Acceptance meant belonging. And if you could belong, you would be a member of the community. And to be a member of the community meant you would survive. If you were not respected, if you were not accepted, and you were unable to belong to that community, you would perish. You would be cast out to be alone, and you would not survive. And so, as a primal need, we all need to be seen, to be heard, to be recognized, and to be accepted. And when I watch couples fight, when I watch people engaged in struggle, what I see being activated is the primal need to protect, to defend, to survive. When I watch a couple struggle, I watch two people protecting themselves from feeling threatened by the other. And when all animals feel threatened, they have a repertoire of protection. Some get big, some get loud, some shrink and hide. But we are living at a time where in our culture, the other, the people who think dramatically different than us, are threatening us. We feel unsafe, we feel vulnerable. We are on high alert to protect ourselves. And I can only say this, for any client, any family, any relationship I have ever worked with, all relationships improve when respect becomes part of that relationship. It brings connection. And in all the struggles, it is what is sacrificed. We are so issue focused that we do not see the humanness in the other person. So where does my talk come from? Well, my awakening, and that's true confessions, my awakening was that I was wishing death on people. I was wishing that people would get the virus and die. And on my generous days, when there was a rally, I only wished that half would die and that the other half would just get sick. And I really began to realize I am no different than those I was condemning. My demonizing of you was dehumanizing myself. As I dehumanized you is what I meant to say. I was also dehumanizing myself. I realized that I hold on to my beliefs and my perspectives for the same reason the other, you, hold on to yours. I truly believe that my beliefs and my perspectives are what would be best for me, would be best for my family, and best for our country. I truly believe that. And so does the other. And it dawned on me, if I am not willing to listen to your perspective, why would I believe you would ever be willing to listen to mine? One of the things that I always teach in my work is that I have to be the person I want the other to be. So I have to be the partner I would want my partner to be. I have to be the person I would want my children to be. I want to read a quote that I read in the first Dharma talk I ever gave, and it's a quote that I read in every talk I ever give, I believe. I've modified it a little. I wonder if you ever change human beings with arguments alone, either by peppering them with sharp facts or by blowing them up with great guns of truth. You scare them, but do you change them? I wonder if you ever make any real differences in human beings without understanding them and respecting them. For when you argue with a person, you are somehow trying to pull them down and make them less and yourself more. But when you try to understand them, when you like them, how eager are they then to know the truth you have? There is nothing in the world that people so much thrive upon, grow fine and rosy and robust upon, as being respected. And so, where am I going with all this? Humans are a very young species on Earth, and it definitely shows. Of all the species on this Earth, whether it's plant or animal. Humans are the only ones that mistreat ourselves and mistreat our host, Mother Earth, as despicably as we do. All other species live in a greater harmony with them, with each other, and with Mother Earth. On the human development model, we function like children. I kind of put us in that 3 to 7 year old in terms of our maturity. Our reactivity continues to be the go-to response when we're feeling challenged, when we're being disagreed with. And so we kind of lack, as a culture, developmentally, the ability to harness those human qualities that would create a kinder and more respectful world. We're not maximizing the human potential to do something better. We are capable of so much more. We want to tap into the full range of our human potential. That includes our enormous capacity for love, for kindness, for generosity, to care, comfort, and nurture each other. These are our primal instincts too. We see them during disasters. People come out and rise to the occasion to care for each other. We want to get beyond needing a disaster for that to show. I can assure you, if that you were on the street and you were hurting and somebody pulled up, they would come to your aid and they wouldn't care what political party you were aligned with. You would feel and be tapping in to that primal instinct to care for and nurture. And so our question is, do we mature as a society in which the creative problem-solving abilities are harnessed so that we can maximize discussion and create an interactive process that actually encourages solutions rather than perpetuating this struggle and the suffering? And for that to happen, we have to mature as a culture. We, the human species, are in need of what I call a cultural developmental leap. And for this to happen, it has to start with me, and it has to start with you. There have been milestones throughout human history, throughout human development. And these milestones have always moved humankind into a different direction. We changed as a species because of these milestones. And many of these milestones have moved us towards the better. But if you take a look at all the milestones, here we are. This is what we have. The pandemic is such a milestone. We have definitely earned a notch somewhere on that yardstick of human development. We are now a notch. And so the need to wake up is now. It's a rhetorical question. Do you like what you see happening? I haven't heard anybody tell me that they like what they see happening. I haven't heard anybody think we're headed into a better direction. So we do need to awaken to move our culture towards being a kinder and more respectful society. What I'm going to ask you to do for a moment is to just close your eyes. And if you want to turn away from the computer so you don't see the glow in your face for a moment, just take a deep breath. Let out any tension or any thoughts that you're having for a moment, just a deep breath, and just sit there for a moment when I ask you this question. What is the story? No, imagine that you are looking back 100 years from now. You are a future generation, and you're looking back from 100 years from now. What is the story you want told about humankind's response to the pandemic? What is the story that generations will tell about humankind as it responded to the pandemic? The next question is, how will I live my life now so that I am contributing to that story becoming real? What am I doing now in my life that will contribute to the story I am hoping is humankind's story as a result of the pandemic? Did we learn how to have dramatically different beliefs while seeing the humanness in each other, to be respectful of each other, encouraging our amazing capacity to collaborate and create solutions that benefit humankind? Will it be the story of a developmental leap in which humankind learned to live in peace and harmony, creating a society that is mutually beneficial for all? When you're ready, feel free to come on back, open your eyes, join. I know because of time, this would be something to be able to think more about, but it is a very, very powerful question for us to awaken to. And so it became very, very clear for me, once I realized how dehumanizing and demonizing I had become, wishing harm on people, reaching really quite a low. And by the way, knowing I wasn't the only one who thought that. So many people said, me too. It's when I realized and awoken to the notion of the Bodhisattva, the peaceful warrior, that it became very clear that it was important to begin to live with the intention of seeing the humanness in all beings. To live with the conscious intention of being respectful in any interaction with any human, regardless of their point of view. And that it was up to me to accept that responsibility. I will be the one that brings that to an interaction with another person, even if you don't. That I'm understanding that arguing without being respectful is only conflict and struggle. Understanding that respectful doesn't mean agreement or a condoning of a position. And understanding that disrespect isn't the way to express disagreement. I understand, and this is such a key piece because people really question me on this. I understand that me being respectful to you doesn't mean I respect you. My being respectful is not about you. I am respectful because that is who I want to be and what I want to be contributing to the new cultural narrative. You're not the one that determines that in me. And so what do we do with that? Well, it's a decision. Some people say, you know, Steve, you make things very simplistic. And I'm always saying, well, I don't know, how complicated do you want it to be? It's a decision to awaken. And that first decision is, I want to change. I want to be different. I want to become much more conscious and intentional to begin to change into that peaceful warrior, the Bodhisattva. And it's going to be very important that you practice self-compassion because you may not be that good at it when you start. And so there are certain skills that are absolutely necessary for change, skills necessary for the art of disagreeing. And that the most important one, and it's been part of my past talks, is that I have to accept 100% responsibility for what I feel, for what I think, and for what I do. I cannot blame you for making me behave, feel, or think in any way. I have to accept that 100% responsibility for that. And this is another concept that people have kind of confusing time understanding. To develop the ability to become immune to being offended. to not take it personally. You know, that's interesting. So when I would be riding my bicycle or in Michigan and in Indiana, I would see signs out for a political candidate that I do not support. And I would find myself raging and thinking how sick these people must be, filled with judgment. And then when I kind of started to awaken, I realized I don't want to keep doing that. And so it became very clear to me that my practice is to learn to become curious and not judgmental. I'm curious why you believe climate change is a conspiracy and a hoax. I am really curious to understand that. I have to be prioritizing that I'm being driven by the principles of kindness and respect that would allow me to be curious about your perspective. If you feel I am present and curious with what you're saying, no matter what point of view you have, I increase the possibility that we may be able to have a conversation. Okay, so this is a practice. And where do you practice? Well, the algorithms of our society are probably not putting you in contact with people who have extreme beliefs from you. The truth of the matter is I do not have any friends that are flying the Confederate flag. I don't have any. None of my friends are wearing swastika underwear. Okay, I'm not in contact with people. And I think we all get into our bubbles. And so then the question is, where do you practice? And the answer to that is you practice in your families. You practice with the people that you love and care about. The family is the seed of all communities. It's where we learn how to treat each other. It is that first community that anyone lives in. It's where we learn about love, kindness, and respect. It's where we learn how to discuss issues respectfully or not, how to disagree, argue, negotiate, and come to a compromise, come to an agreement respectfully or not, how to express feelings and thoughts to each other respectfully or not, how to be angry, disappointed, frustrated respectfully or not. It is where we are taught about prioritizing the relationship over the issues, or are we taught that the issues are more important than the relationship? And so this developmental cultural leap is a multi-generational change. And it begins with me, but it begins in the family. When people grow up in that first community, experiencing what I've been talking about, they will enter into the larger community of society with that as a fundamental experience and awareness. When I talk about being respectfully angry, clients of mine don't have a clue of what that could look like. Respectfully disappointed and frustrated. There isn't a vision as an experience of what that looks like. And so when enough people begin to have that experience in their families, they will enter into our culture. And eventually, the culture will change. In 1969, I went to college. It was an incredibly wild time, 68 and 69. And during the anti-war movement, I was told the story of the 100th monkey. Essentially, it came from the idea when people said, well, what is my one voice? You know, if I just speak out, how is that going to end the war? How is that going to change society? And so the story of the 100th monkey is that on an island in Japan, a monkey learned to eat a sweet potato that was not part of their normal diet. And then after that monkey began to eat the sweet potato, another monkey on that island began to eat the sweet potato until the myth goes, until when that 100th monkey started eating the sweet potato, monkeys on an island 1,000 miles away began to eat that sweet potato too. That when there is enough momentum, it becomes, the wisdom of that momentum transcends space and time, and culture changes. I mean, think about this. What if with enough momentum, it became fashionable to be respectful? Look how quick fashion influences the world, how quickly those changes take place. And so the idea here is for us to be able to co-create solutions to the problems we face as a society, that we begin to become conscious and intentional of what we bring and what we offer, and that maybe, then maybe your action becomes the 100th monkey and tilts the cultural thinking. By the time, when I was in college in '69, and by the time 1973 came about when I graduated, the draft had ended. In '69, the war was raging. In '73, the draft was ending. We do cause change by our actions. And so, in closing, I just want to reiterate, and then I certainly want to open this up for questions. I want to reiterate something I said before. It is not, the outcomes of our conversations are not what is most important. The way we engage in these conversations is what is preventing us from moving forward as a society and as a culture. We do have these rituals of struggle that prevent any new ideas from emerging from our differences. Instead of connecting to create a more mutually beneficial existence for all, we are engaged in struggle, in destructive process for ourselves and our society. And so the time to awaken to what we are creating is now. And let's take advantage of this pandemic milestone to move us in the more positive direction. So I think I'll stop here. I threw a lot at you to open it up for questions, thoughts, ideas.
Steve, I want to thank you for your energy and your insights and for your big heart addressing this, because I think it reminds me when you were saying like your awakening of seeing what was going on in your own mind towards others that was very harmful and aggressive, and that, you know, we have to be the change that we want to see in the world. And I love that. I love that idea that, you know, as we develop a different level of intentionality and consciousness, it's meaningful. It matters. It really, truly matters. And I think you're absolutely right about where does the responsibility lie? You know, it's a Lojong training, drive all blames into one. It starts with me. There's no other way that I can address the difficulties and the frustrations without looking at my own darkness, my own difficulty. So thank you. Beautiful, beautiful talk.
Thanks, Diane. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Any thoughts? We have a half hour. I could do the whole talk again. No, I'm just kidding.
Steve, thank you so much. This is so needed. Could you talk a little bit more about how to do this respect with respect? You talked about having to accept 100% responsibility for emotions, but I think there's more to it than that.
So Lori, ask your question again, because you kind of, the sound kind of broke up when you were saying.
So how can you talk a little bit more about how to disagree respectfully, taking responsibility for our emotions, but it seems like that's just the first part.
Well, again, if you're rooted in recognizing that other people have their beliefs for their reasons as a fellow human, and I'm hearing their description or their their fundamental beliefs, and they're dramatically different than mine. If I'm maintaining curiosity, I'm able to ask questions. There was an example of somebody saying that they thought Black Lives Matter was a terrorist organization. And the question was, so tell me what it is you believe a terrorist organization is. And the answer had to do about changing society and causing problems in society. And my curiosity would be that I was able to say things like, well, if you're thinking that a terrorist organization is meant to change society, then I see why you might think that Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization. The question then was, what is it that frightens you? What is it that scares you about the change that Black Lives Matter is trying to create? So the conversation, the connection was able to maintain. As soon as the judgment comes out, like, you're out of your mind, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, how could you think that? As soon as there's that kind of reactivity of dismissing and judging the other, the conversation is over and it just becomes a shouting match. So I need to know, like I used a little example before, respectfully. Again, the other thing I want to do add though, Lori, which is important, you know, being the Bodhisattva, being the intentional respect, doesn't mean that you don't have your own voice. It doesn't mean that you don't have a voice to express what you feel, what you think, and what you believe. You know, sometimes when people are aggressive, so if I'm sitting there trying to be respectful to you and you're attacking me, and I've had this experience, I say very respectfully, I would like to continue in this conversation, but my sense is that whatever I'm about to say, your intention is to reflect to me how stupid, how ridiculous my thoughts are. And so it is not very inviting for me to continue in this conversation. If you would like to talk more about this, I would appreciate if we could do it in a kinder and more respectful way. And if they say, screw you, I will say, I understand that this conversation is probably ending now. Again, my goal isn't to convince you. My goal is to connect. And if a person doesn't want to connect, I'm not going to be able to make them connect, right? I don't have that. I can only be responsible for me being the respect in an interaction. And that does take discipline. It does take me learning how to act differently than I feel. I might have this surge of anger and reaction, but I call it throwing the emotional circuit breaker. And I have to stop. And then I have to remember my intention is to be respectful. Remember, I do want to emphasize, me being respectful to you doesn't mean I respect you. There are definitely people, and I don't need to name names because we're probably all in the same bubble, who I don't respect. But I can still be respectful and disagree respectfully. Whether they'll hear it or engage, I don't have any control over that. Does that kind of clarify a bit there, Lauren?
Yeah, that was helpful. Thank you.
Sure, sure.
Mark, this is Mark.
Hey.
I was just thinking a few things like, you know, the old saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. But also when the going gets tough, the worst of humanity comes out. And I think your talk has kind of revealed, as well as your initial reactions reveal, that kind of our own initial sort of not so good reactions to differences and to struggle and that kind of thing. But you know, so I know working with couples as well, or families, or so forth, you know, when things get really tough, do they circle the wagons to protect and sort of support one another? Or do they crumble and divide? Sort of is telling as well. And if it's true, the Zen saying that your life is your practice, or what is happening right now is our practice, then that means we're more or less called to care for one another more than usual, because you have to really be concerned that you don't spread the virus, and that you are as safe as possible for the sake of others, which is the Bodhisattva vow that, you know, we're there to care for all sentient beings and their suffering. So that I believe is a huge calling or lesson, or what is needed during this time, when there is immense division, immense suffering, immense political and racial and other kinds of divides and conflict. So, you know, so a lot of people, I say stuff like, oh, I can't wait till 2020 is over, the worst in history, you know, all these negatives. But if we're to take the truth that our life is our practice, or whatever is happening is our practice, that is, we're to go deep into ourselves and call out the compassion, the deep caring and listening that is there, then it's not the worst time in history. It's just calling us to go deeper. Does that make any sense?
I think so. I mean, I do. I mean, I think that's essentially what I'm also trying to say here.
Yeah.
We have to awaken to what it is we are creating as a culture, and I can only be responsible for my contribution to this.
Yeah.
And it's really important. And I think the distinction that I'm trying to make is, I am always going to be right, and you are always going to be wrong about certain things. And if we are making the notion of convincing the other the priority, we will only struggle. The structure of those conversations is only a structure for struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And the priority is recognizing the humanness, recognizing that connection is the only piece that is going to invite the possibility of harnessing a creative engagement to come up with a solution that could benefit us all. But as long as we stay in polarized opposing positions, that rigid adherence,
Yeah.
it's in family systems, it's called a no change contract.
Mm-hmm.
If you continue to maintain your position against the other, it's a no change contract. Except I always emphasize, what does change is more alienation from each other, more demonizing each other, more hatred for each other. And then people's families fall apart, or they persevere and they stick it out for 50 years of not liking each other and struggling with each other. You know, I mean, and they each believe that it's the other one's fault. And so it's just, they are stuck opposers, and it will not shift. And I think the awakening here is that connecting to you, being curious, that curiosity versus judgment is such a key component.
Yeah.
Such a key component.
Yeah.
Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve, I really am glad that I asked you, even more glad than when we first touched base. This is just a wonderful talk. I want to tell you about, tell everybody about something that I started thinking about a while back. Marie Howe, a great poet, wrote a poem called Singularity, and it's based on her trying to understand the Big Bang. And I started really thinking about the Big Bang and how everything that is, that we can see, everything that we perceive, everything that comes to us, and everything that emanates from us is one thing. And whatever that one thing is, it is the singularity. It is the Big Bang. So whether we're looking at a blade of grass or another person, we are it. Dogen Genji talks about this all the time when he says grass, trees, tiles, and pebbles,
Mm.
you know? And it isn't just, I love the idea of sentient beings, but it isn't just sentient beings, it's all beings. That's the Bodhisattva vow.
Right. In 1997, I spent a week in New Mexico with a Lakota medicine man. And there were about 15 of us. I didn't have them to myself. And one of the things he awoke, he awokened or awakened. You know what I'm saying? He talked about the tree nation. He talked about the plant nation. He talked about the fish nation, the winged nation, the insect nation, the two-legged nation, and the four-legged nation of Mother Earth. And I remember thinking about the different nations that are on this earth. And that's when it became very clear to me that we are the only nation, species, that, as I said before, that mistreats itself to the degree we do, and so disrespectful to our host. And that's something we have to wake up to. And when I heard people say to me, "Oh, it's never going to change. It's human nature." And that's when I want to say, but human nature is everything I said before: love, compassion, caring, nurturing. The bottom line is, when people are struggling and fighting, they just want to be acknowledged. They just want to feel, as I said, respected at the primal level, just to be acknowledged. When somebody feels acknowledged, there is a connection. Yeah, Ruth.
Mark, I didn't understand exactly what you meant about the Big Bang, and it's intriguing to me. And I wondered if you could just elucidate a little bit.
Are you talking to me or your husband?
Well, no, you mentioned the Big Bang. I'm not going near that.
Well, I'm not a physicist. Okay, let's begin right there. And I started thinking about it. You should read it. You should. I apologize for saying that. I encourage you to find this poem by Marie Howe and read it. It's a lovely poem. Singularity is the word that Stephen Hawking gave to the Big Bang. And the Big Bang is the theory that out of the dense, before there was anything, this is actually Buddhist cosmology also, which is really fascinating to me, because more than 3,000 years ago, before Buddha even, the Hindus, they had this notion of this beginning of the universe out of one dense particle. So physicists say out of one dense particle, which is so dense that it exploded. And that then was the germ isn't the right word, but that became the germs of the universe and all of the elements that led to the development of all the various planets, suns and planets, and Earth. And then ultimately everything on Earth, from that one dense, indefinable something that had no beginning.
What did you mean when you said if we're looking at a blade of grass, or if we're looking at, a person?
Because everything came from that. Everything. So blades of grass evolved to be blades of grass. Humans evolved to be humans. Cows evolved to be cows. All in a symbiotic way originally.
And if you listen, you can still hear the background radiation from the Big Bang. There's the cosmologists say that there's a wavelength that you hear when you listen to the universe. That's the remnants of the Big Bang.
I gotta say, I never imagined this is the part of it that this conversation would have come out of my talk. It's very enlightening. That's the beauty of community.
It's interbeing too, right?
I'm sorry, what?
It's interbeing. It's cause and effect. That is
The rising.
what this is.
That's right. And I think, again, the cause and effect. I think this is about empowering us as humans to recognize we really do have an effect, and that there really is a very clear connection to us beginning to reshape this culture, to it becoming a much more compassionate, kinder, and more respectful culture. And that's not science fiction. This is not pie in the sky. If each person took responsibility for creating change, then change can occur. I'm just wondering, I just want to see something. Am I able to share my screen for a moment? Is that possible?
Yes, if, let me see. No, Sheehan has to, Michael, are you there? You have to make.
Well, that's okay. It's not worth it. It's just.
Oh, June just did.
Try it.
Yeah.
Okay, let me try it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my
Okay,
God.
you're able to see this picture?
Yes.
Okay. I use this when I say, in 1969, I graduated high school. When I graduated high school, they didn't even call them men and women at college. They said boys and girls. So girls couldn't come into the boys' into the boys' dormitory except for certain visiting hours. And they could only, and gay and lesbian people were still hidden out. Stonewall took place in September of '69. The war was raging in Vietnam. And by the time I graduated, so much had changed. That's my graduation from college. So much wound up changing in that very short period of time. So I just wanted you to see that change can happen rather quickly when there is enough momentum in a direction. And so that's important for us to realize. I agree. What we're talking about is reshaping our culture, literally a developmental leap. We do have to mature as a culture in society. But I don't want you to think that you can't live to see that, because all you have to do is start contributing to it now. And yes, Robin.
Well, I've just been thinking, if the election goes the way I think most of us hope that it will, I think our troubles are far from over. And that we have to remember what it's like to lose. And so I'm thinking that there would be a large, there would be a large number of people in this country who would be very unhappy and feel like they weren't cared about or listened to. And I'm just wondering what we can do as a Zen center, as a Sangha, to begin to reach out. Because as you mentioned, we live in a bubble of like-minded people and don't have access, except perhaps through our families, to people who think differently, who are going to be disappointed, upset, angry, resentful, worried, scared, all those things. So I'm just wondering if there's something we could do, or if you have any thoughts about that, reach outside our bubble.
Well, StoryCorps, which Ruth, my wife, turned me on to, David Isay, I-S-A-Y. StoryCorps is a group that gathers people who are vastly different in their beliefs and creates an opportunity for people who think and believe dramatically different, creates an opportunity for people to come together. So if you Google up StoryCorps, you're going to see that there are actually, this exists as a program to bring people who think very differently together. Although when I was thinking about this talk, I thought one of the humorous things is, in order to show that by me being a kind and being a human being, I was going to look for a bar in Southern Indiana that was flying the Confederate flag. And I was going to go in with my Biden shirt, sit down at the bar, do 6 shots of tequila and get into a conversation about politics. and have a body cam video taping what that would look like to demonstrate. But then I thought, I don't know if Mark would have been able to get someone to take my place if I didn't return. So, but I do sometimes think about how to, like, and I'm not suggesting we do this, but knocking on the door of somebody that has a sign out that's very different than my belief and really saying, I just want to hear. Actually, I was at a party before before Trump got elected. And there was a woman at this party who was for Trump. And in Oak Park, that's a gutsy move. And she was being attacked verbally for a woman supporting him, and went on like that. I didn't say a word. After it all died down, I went over to her and I said, I would really like to understand what it is that draws you to this candidate. I am not in any way going to debate, argue. I just want to listen. And she, articulated her reasons. It sounded to me like she listened to a lot of hate radio, but I practiced this non-judgment and curiosity. And there was somewhat of an exchange, and it was more that, wow, we think very differently. And it was not an intention to change her mind. But I do think that maybe as a Sangha, maybe there is a way we reach out for people who think very differently than us, in order to start engaging as sort of the human laboratory of how do we really disagree in ways that maintain connection. In the nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg's book, which I mention almost every talk I give, the notion that me being kind and respectful to you is not dependent on you being kind and respectful to me.
Mhm.
And that's a practice. That is a practice. And how I don't take what you're saying personally, because if you think about it, why, if you tell me that the world is flat, why am I going to get incensed and outraged and angry about that? Why do I get angry when I hear these points of views that I don't even think are real? I think they're made up. I think, whatever we think. But why does it trigger my anger? And I think it goes to the primal instinct that we feel threatened. We feel there's an enemy. We are being triggered to protect and survive. And I think we have to awaken to the fact that we're really not that threatened. We really have to interrupt that piece and to understand that curiosity can lead to a conversation in which you still may never, and I still say, you will never agree. An agreement cannot be the foundation of that conversation. Connecting, because I want that radical right person to walk away and possibly think, wow, that liberal guy was pretty cool. He really listened. I don't know if he's going to think that or she's going to think that. But that would be my intention, is to at least try to connect with somebody in which they felt heard and they felt respected, even though I may not respect them. I was respectful because that's my position. And that's, it's sort of, that's the story I want to be contributing, so that when the future generations are looking back to the time of pandemic, I want to be at least able to feel that I attempted to contribute in ways that could bring that change about.
Yeah, I know.
That's all I have control over. And if you start thinking bigger, you're going to get flooded. And I don't think you'll be able to do that.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was such a fabulous talk. This last part you said reminds me of what Bernie Glassman said, one of his last quotes. It's just your opinion, man. It's just your opinion, man.
Yep.
Yeah, we can just look at it that way. I think that would go a long way towards peace.
You're right, June. Yes. Yeah. Well,
Steve, thank you very much for this today. It's 11 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for inviting me for making this necessary, Mark. Thank you.
I didn't make it necessary, but I agree. We all made it necessary.
Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks to everyone. It's good to see some familiar faces because I know I haven't been around, but thinking of you all. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much.
Take care.